The wine glass hit the table so hard I thought it would shatter. It didn't. Instead, the sound echoed through the dining room like a gunshot, silencing everyone mid-conversation. I was sitting next to my husband Daniel, halfway through Sunday dinner with his family, when his mother Margaret leaned forward with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "She only married you for your money, Danny," she said, her voice dripping with fake concern. The room froze. Daniel's fork stopped in midair. His brother looked away. His father stared at his plate. I felt my cheeks burn hot, my hands trembling beneath the table. Everyone was waiting to see how I'd react. Would I cry? Would I defend myself? Would I let her win? Instead, I reached for my purse with a calm I didn't feel. My fingers found the folded paper I always kept there. A bank statement. My bank statement. I pulled it out slowly and laid it flat on the table between the mashed potatoes and the gravy boat. "Funny," I said quietly, my voice steady even though my heart was racing, "because that's my account, not his." The silence that followed was different. It was the silence of someone being proven wrong. Margaret's face went pale. Daniel's eyes went wide. I watched her try to find words that wouldn't come. That moment changed everything. "My name is Jenny Parker, and I didn't marry for money. I made my own. Let me tell you how it started. I grew up in a neighborhood where everyone struggled. My parents worked hard but never had much. I learned early that if I wanted something, I'd have to earn it myself. Through high school, I worked at a coffee shop on weekends, making enough to pay for my own clothes and saving the rest. College was the same story, 2 jobs, late nights, studying between shifts. I waited tables at a restaurant and worked as a receptionist at a law firm during the day. My friends went to parties. I went to work. They complained about student loans. I had none because I paid as I went. By the time I graduated with a business degree, I had something most people didn't: discipline and hunger. I started my own interior design business from my tiny apartment with a laptop, a camera, and a portfolio of small projects I'd done for friends. Every penny I made went back into the business. I bought better lighting equipment. I took online courses. I networked at every event I could find. 3 years later, I had a real office and 3 employees. When I met Daniel at a coffee shop, I wasn't looking for love. I was too busy building. He was sweet, kind, and struggling financially himself, but I didn't care about his bank account. For the first time in my life, I cared about the person. I remember our engagement dinner like it was yesterday. Daniel's whole family was there, his parents, his brother, aunts, uncles, cousins. They were celebrating our engagement at an expensive restaurant. I felt nervous but happy. Then Margaret said it. "So Jenny," she said with a sharp laugh, "you must have Googled our family before saying yes to Danny." Everyone chuckled. Daniel laughed awkwardly. I forced a smile even though something in my stomach twisted. "Actually, I didn't know anything about his family until he told me," I said honestly. Margaret's eyes narrowed just slightly. "Really? A girl like you?" she said, as if a girl like me couldn't possibly date someone without checking his bank account first. Her tone was light, but her meaning was clear. She thought I was a gold digger. I should have known right then that she'd decided something about me. Looking back now, I realized that joke was the first real warning. But I was in love. I was happy. I told myself to ignore it. 2 weeks before the wedding, Margaret called me. "Jenny, let's do lunch. Just us girls," she said in that sweet voice that didn't quite sound sincere. I agreed, thinking maybe we'd finally bond. We met at a restaurant near her house. I was nervous but hopeful. We ordered salads and made small talk until Margaret suddenly pulled a document from her purse. My stomach dropped. It was a prenuptial agreement. "I'm sure a girl like you understands business," Margaret said, sliding it across the table like it was nothing. My hands went cold. "If you really love my son, you won't mind signing this. It just protects our family assets." I stared at that paper for a long moment. I thought about telling her that I had my own assets to protect. I thought about getting angry. Instead, I stayed calm. "I won't be signing that," I said kindly but firmly. "I married Daniel for love, not money. And honestly, Margaret, a real family doesn't make love and sign contracts." Her face went hard. The friendly mask dropped completely. "We'll see how long you feel that way," she said coldly, gathering the papers. That was the moment I knew. I wasn't just marrying Daniel. I was going to war with his mother. My wedding day was beautiful. The ceremony was perfect. I wore a white dress my mother helped me pick out. Daniel cried when he saw me. For a few hours, nothing else mattered but us. But then, during the reception, I needed to use the bathroom. As I walked past the hallway near the coat check, I heard Margaret's voice. She'll leave him as soon as she gets what she came for, she was telling Daniel's cousin. I froze. Through the half-open door, I could see Margaret shaking her head sadly. Mark my words. Once she bleeds him dry, she's gone. That's the type. I didn't go to the bathroom. I just walked back to the reception and smiled for the rest of the night. I smiled while getting photos taken. I smiled while cutting the cake. I smiled while dancing with Daniel. But inside my heart was breaking. Not because of what Margaret said, but because I realized something sad. Love might not be enough. If the people closest to your husband don't believe in you, what chance does your marriage have? The first year of marriage was harder than I expected. Margaret didn't attack directly. She was smarter than that. Instead, she did small things that added up like poison. She'd forget my birthday but give Daniel an expensive watch. She'd make comments about my family being poor, said with a laugh so I couldn't call her out. When I got a promotion at work, she'd say things like, "That's nice, but I'm sure Daniel knows people who could help you." She'd ice me out at family dinners, speaking only to Daniel as if I wasn't there. And Daniel? He'd say things like, "That's just how Mom is." He'd brush it off. Each time he did, I felt a little piece of my heart harden. I started to wonder if he was on her side. I started to wonder if maybe he believed her too, that I'd married him for money. The hurt was like water wearing down a stone. Slowly, day by day, it wore me down. A year into our marriage, I landed my biggest design contract yet. It was a luxury penthouse for a wealthy family. I was so excited I couldn't sleep. When I told Daniel, he was happy for me. But the next day at a family brunch, Margaret said something that broke something in me. "Oh, Ginny got that big job," she announced loudly. "Daniel must have pulled some strings for her. He knows people in real estate." I corrected her gently. "Actually, they hired me based on my portfolio. Daniel didn't know them." Margaret smiled that fake smile. "Well, it's sweet of you to protect his feelings," she said, as if my success couldn't possibly be real. Daniel didn't defend me. He didn't say anything. He just picked at his eggs and stayed quiet. That silence was worse than anything Margaret could have said. At that moment, I felt completely alone, not just from Margaret but from the man I married. The worst moment came at a family barbecue that summer. We were all sitting outside, maybe 20 of us, enjoying food and talking. Margaret stood up suddenly and announced to everyone that my business was failing. "Poor Jenny's losing clients left and right," she said, shaking her head with fake sympathy. "It's so hard being an entrepreneur. Thank goodness she has Daniel to lean on." My face went red. Everyone turned to look at me. I pulled out my phone calmly and showed Margaret, and everyone else, my calendar, completely booked for the next 8 months. "Actually, I'm doing better than ever," I said politely. Margaret just smiled that smug smile. "We all exaggerate sometimes, don't we?" she said, as if I was the liar. The humiliation burned deeper than anger. It wasn't just what she said. It was that she'd said it in front of everyone, and I had to prove myself like a child caught in a lie. That's when I knew playing nice wasn't working anymore. That's when I made a decision that would change everything. When Margaret visited our house a few weeks later, I noticed her in my office while I was making coffee. She was supposed to be in the living room. When I came back, she was standing near my desk, and I could have sworn she was looking at papers. I didn't say anything. I just smiled and let her back out. But that night, I installed a small nanny camera in my office, hidden in a picture frame on the shelf. I told myself I was just being cautious. I wasn't. I was gathering ammunition. The next time Margaret visited, I watched the footage. There she was, rifling through my desk drawers like she owned the place. She photographed bank statements. She wrote down numbers in a small notebook. She was stealing information about my finances. I saved the video file carefully and didn't tell anyone. Not yet. I was learning that revenge, real revenge, requires patience. With that information safely saved, I started noticing patterns. Margaret began calling Daniel almost every day. I'd hear her voice on the phone, whispering things I couldn't quite make out, but I could see the effect. Daniel started becoming distant. He'd come home tired even when he hadn't worked hard. He'd seem distracted during dinner. When I tried to talk to him about my day, he'd give short answers. One night I asked him directly what was wrong. He hesitated, then said his mom was worried about me. Worried about what? I asked. He couldn't quite explain it. She just thought I was too focused on money and not focused enough on him. That's when I realized Margaret wasn't just attacking me anymore. She was poisoning my marriage from the inside, and my husband was letting her. I wondered if I was losing my mind or if I was really losing him. Then came the charity gala. Margaret had invited me herself, which was unusual. She made a big deal about how they were raising money for a children's hospital. I wanted to support the cause, so I said yes. We were there for maybe an hour when a woman I'd never met approached me. She seemed friendly, concerned even. I heard something I thought you should know, she said quietly, pulling me aside. I heard that Daniel's been covering your business losses. That he's been paying for your company. I stared at her. That's not true, I said, but my stomach felt sick. How many people had heard this lie? The woman patted my arm sympathetically and walked away. That's when I understood Margaret's strategy completely. She wasn't just telling Daniel lies. She was telling the entire city lies about me. She was destroying my reputation piece by piece, making me look like a parasite living off her son. I confronted Daniel that night. I told him everything about Margaret's lies, about the people spreading rumors, about what I'd overheard. Daniel looked uncomfortable. He shifted in his seat. Then he admitted something that made my heart stop. His mother had shown him bank transfers. She said they proved I'd been draining his account. She said I was stealing from him. I started laughing, but it came out wrong, like I was breaking. She accessed our joint statements, I said. She's going through our private financial information. Daniel's face went pale when he realized what that meant. Margaret had committed a crime. She'd violated our privacy to build a case against me. That night I sat on our bed in the dark and realized something. I couldn't fix this. Margaret didn't just not like me. She was actively working to destroy my marriage and my reputation. And if I didn't do something, she would succeed. The next morning I packed a bag. I put clothes in a suitcase and set it by the door. Daniel found me and asked where I was going. Away, I said, my voice hollow. I can't do this anymore. But then I stopped. I was standing there with my suitcase, and something shifted inside me. I'd spent my whole life running towards success, never running away from problems. Why was I starting now? I unpacked that suitcase slowly, folding each piece back into the closet. No, I whispered to myself. Not this time. I wasn't going to let Margaret win by leaving. I wasn't going to give up on my marriage or my life. But I wasn't going to fight her with anger either. Instead, I decided to fight her the only way that would really hurt, with the truth. My revenge wouldn't be loud or mean. It would be silent, steady, and absolutely devastating. I started executing my plan carefully. First, I called my accountant and we separated my finances completely. Everything Margaret had seen in those joint statements was now private. I moved my business assets to a private company she couldn't touch. I was polite at family gatherings, acting like nothing was wrong, but I was quietly building walls. I gathered every piece of evidence, the nanny camera footage, records of the lies she'd told, screenshots of bank statements before I changed them. I was patient. I was methodical. I played dumb while secretly preparing. Margaret had no idea that I knew about the prenup attempt, the snooping, the lies. She thought she was winning. She had no idea the game was about to change completely. Then something beautiful happened. My business exploded. A celebrity client, someone huge, posted photos from a party where she'd hired me to design her home. The photos went viral on social media. Suddenly my phone was ringing constantly. Fashion magazines wanted to feature my work. Companies wanted to collaborate. Within 3 months my business had tripled. I had to hire more employees. I moved to a bigger office in the nicest part of the city. For the first time in years I wasn't just successful. I was undeniably, publicly successful. And everyone knew my name, not Daniel's. My success became the thing Margaret had always feared most. It became real. It became impossible to deny. One afternoon, Margaret showed up at my new office unannounced. She said she wanted to congratulate me, but her eyes told a different story. They told the story of jealousy. We walked through the office together, and I could feel her anger radiating off her skin. When we got to my executive office, she finally spoke. "Enjoy it while it lasts, dear," she said coldly. "Men like Daniel don't stay loyal when women outshine them. He'll leave you and you'll lose everything." I turned to face her. I was calm. I was ice. "Maybe men like Daniel shouldn't be underestimated," I said quietly. "And maybe mothers who raise them shouldn't teach them to be afraid of strong women." Margaret's face went white. For the first time, I wasn't playing defense. I was playing offense. And I was winning. A few days later, I got lucky. I was home when Margaret called Daniel. My phone was in the other room, so I picked up the extension to tell Daniel that I was home. That's when I heard her begging him. "Danny, I need money," she said desperately. "I'm in so much debt. Can you help me? Please." Daniel sounded shocked. He asked her what happened. Margaret broke down, explaining that she'd made bad investments, lost money on business deals, and now she was drowning. She owed over $200,000. She begged him not to tell anyone. That's when I understood. Margaret's cruelty wasn't just about protecting Daniel. It was about jealousy. She was drowning financially and I was soaring. She was desperate and I was thriving. I recorded that conversation, not because I wanted to destroy her, but because I needed to understand her completely. Knowing her weakness would help me know her strength. I decided to give Margaret exactly what she deserved, a taste of her own medicine. At Daniel's birthday party, Margaret stood up to give a toast. "Here's to our generous Jenny," she said with a bitter smile, "who found gold in our family." Everyone smiled uncomfortably, knowing what she meant. I let the words hang there for just a moment. Then I stood up and brought out the birthday cake myself. It was covered in beautiful edible gold leaf. "Guess you're right," I said sweetly, looking directly at Margaret. "I did find gold. I made it myself." The room went quiet. Then people started laughing. But Margaret wasn't laughing. She was staring at me with something close to fear. That's when she realized I wasn't the girl she'd been bullying anymore. I'd become someone she couldn't control. Then Daniel told me something that broke my heart and hardened it at the same time. He confessed that his mother had convinced him to ask for joint control of my company. He was ashamed when he told me. He said he'd almost done it before he realized how wrong it was. I felt betrayed. My husband, the man I loved, had almost let his mother talk him into stealing from me. I said yes to the request anyway. Daniel looked shocked. But I had a plan. While he thought he had authority over my company, I quietly set up legal safeguards that made his authority worthless. It was chess, not checkers. I was letting him think he was winning while I was making sure he couldn't actually hurt me. That's when I learned that sometimes you have to let people think they've won to really beat them. I decided it was time for the final confrontation. I called Margaret and asked her to come to my office. She came expecting to see me broken, I think. Instead, she found me in complete control. I had my laptop ready. Without saying much, I played the nanny camera footage of her stealing from my desk. Then I played the recording of her begging Daniel for money. I watched her face go from confused to angry to absolutely terrified. When the recordings ended, I looked her in the eye. "If you ever speak about me again," I said calmly, "to anyone, this goes to everyone you've lied to. Your friends. Your family. Daniel. Your creditors. I have copies everywhere." Margaret opened her mouth to speak, but nothing came out. She realized that I had won. She had lost. And there was nothing she could do about it. For 3 weeks, Margaret went completely silent. No calls. No visits. No comments. I thought maybe she'd finally learned her lesson. But then she did something desperate. She started spreading rumors that I cheated on Daniel. She told people I wasn't faithful. But this time something different happened. Nobody believed her. My reputation was too strong. My success was too real. Daniel had finally seen his mother for who she was. When the rumors reached him, he didn't even hesitate. He told his mother that if she said one more word about me, she'd lose him completely. For the first time, he chose me over her. Margaret's control was broken. The tie between them was severed. She'd pushed too far. And now she had nothing left but her bitterness. Daniel and I had a long conversation that night. He cried. He told me how sorry he was for believing his mother. He told me how stupid he'd been. I told him I forgave him, but that things had to change. His mother couldn't be in our lives anymore unless she changed. Daniel agreed completely. He called Margaret and told her that he was done. He told her that he loved me more than he'd ever love her, and if she couldn't accept that, then he couldn't accept her. Margaret pleaded with him. She said she was only trying to protect him. But protection that destroys innocent people isn't protection. It's poison. Daniel finally understood that. He was finally free from her manipulation. And so was I. Months passed. My business continued to grow. I was offered a chance to sell my company to a larger corporation. The offer was incredible, 7 figures. I accepted it. And then I decided to do something I'd been dreaming about. I invited the whole family to dinner at my home. Everyone came. Even Margaret, who sat silently in the corner, bitter and broken. When everyone was settled around my new dining table, Daniel asked me to share my announcement. I smiled and pulled out an envelope. I slid it across the table just like I'd done that night at the restaurant with the bank statement. Inside was the acquisition letter. 7 figures. I was now wealthier than the entire family combined. Margaret stared at the paper like it was written in a language she couldn't understand. One more thing, I said, standing up. I pulled out another piece of paper, my original bank statement from all those years ago. The one I'd shown her at that disastrous family dinner. This is still my account, I said calmly. I never needed Daniel's money. I never needed anyone's money. I never married for money, Margaret. You just couldn't imagine that a woman could build something on her own. Margaret opened her mouth. She closed it. She opened it again. But there were no words left. The same silence that had opened my story now closed it. But this time I owned that silence. This time I had nothing left to prove. Looking back now, I understand what I learned. Revenge isn't about screaming louder than the people who hurt you. It's about living so well that their words die in the silence they created. Margaret tried to destroy me because she was afraid of me. She saw a woman building something real, and instead of celebrating it, she tried to tear it down. But you can't tear down someone who's constantly building. Daniel and I eventually rebuilt our trust. We became partners, equals, not victims and bullies. And Margaret? She withdrew from her social circles. Her influence evaporated like water in the sun. She'd lost her son. She'd lost her credibility. All she had left was time to think about the choices she'd made. I never needed revenge to be loud. I never needed to scream or fight. I just needed to keep being exactly who I was, strong, honest, and undeniable. That was enough. That was everything.